Hey, Point, I'm really excited. It's time for Point Leftovers. This last week, somebody texted in a really big question. On Sunday morning, we were talking about Elijah and his showdown with the false prophets on Mount Carmel, and how after God was proven to be real, he went and slaughtered and had all 450 of these false prophets killed. And the question that came in a little bit after church was this: how is it that God can command, "Thou shalt not murder," and at the same time, Elijah and others can go and kill false prophets? So often in history, religion and God has been used as a reason to kill and wage war. How do we hold together this idea of "thou shalt not murder" and waging war on behalf of God's name? I love this question. I think it's really important. In Deuteronomy chapter 5, in the 10 commandments, the fifth commandment, or in some communities, the sixth commandment, is "you shall not murder." Generally, this means don't kill at all. Don't take someone else's life. We see in all kinds of places in the Old Testament and in the New that taking of someone's life is considered to be bad. But there are times in which taking someone's life is a good thing in Scripture. In Scripture, when someone sins in a grievous way and this sin is going to bring harm to the community, there are places in the Old Testament where that sin is commanded then to bring death. In fact, all sin is promised to eventually bring death. For some of us, if the community is in danger because of that sin, they were told to put the people to death. In other cases in the Old Testament and New, wars are waged. And these wars are waged with other nations for the sake of promoting peace, or preserving peace, shall I say. These wars are waged in going against an enemy who is going to bring harm to your people. And this in the Old Testament is considered to be good. Not only this, there are times when other people groups are causing all kinds of harm and evil and doing all kinds of injustice. And God says to go and wage war for the sake of promoting justice, of bringing those who are oppressed freedom. We can ask ourselves these questions. Well, this is the Old Testament. What about the New Testament? Well, in the New Testament, we see that we are called as Christians to submit to and honor our government. In Romans chapter 13, our government is given all authority by God. Nothing comes apart from him. On top of this, the government is given the authority to wield the sword for the sake of justice. Well, what does this mean? We believe that in Scripture it is okay to kill when it's done by a government for the sake of punishing sin, when it's done by a government for the sake of preserving peace, or when it's done by a government for the sake of promoting justice. So who then can do these things? Well, the government can choose to give its authority, its role, its responsibility to care for the people to the people. This is why we have law enforcement officers who, when needed for the sake of preserving life, are authorized to take life. This is why we have military individuals who day in and day out put themselves in harm's way to sometimes even take life for the sake of preserving life. You and I as Christians can participate in law enforcement. We can support our military in their endeavors because of their role to preserve peace and promote justice. Now, no longer do we frequently see death as a consequence for sin, and that you and I should not be going and killing our neighbor when our neighbor sins against us. Please don't do that. That's really bad. Really bad. However, there is an argument that could be made that the government has the authority, though maybe not the obligation, to enact the death penalty where it is deserved. But that's for them to decide and not for you and me to decide. Now, there could be a question then: is there ever a time for you or for me to kill somebody? Is there ever a time in Scripture when it is allowed? And this gets to be a really gray and murky and confusing reality. See, in Scripture, there are times in which it talks about if a thief comes in the middle of the night and you kill him, that man should not be held guilty. But if the thief comes in when the sun has risen and you kill him, then you should be guilty. In Scripture, it talks about if you kill a man accidentally or in self-defense, how do you find a safe haven and a place to receive justice, to not simply be put to death, but instead to actually have due process and have the government decide, did you do this intentionally, spitefully, for wrong motive, or for the right motives? And in America, we have all kinds of laws on the books about if you kill unintentionally or accidentally or in self-defense, when is it okay? And so you and I could say that there are times when, for the sake of preserving peace and promoting justice, specifically in self-defense, murder or killing may be okay. In fact, our government has given to you and I the authority to wield weapons, guns specifically, and as long as they have given us that authority in the right instances, in the right moments, for the sake of our neighbor and preserving the life of our neighbor, we may be authorized by our government to take a life. Never should a life be taken easily or be taken flippantly. Never should it be taken quickly as a thing done without consideration or thought. And so I hope and pray that you're never in a situation where you need to take a life. I also hope and pray that our law enforcement officers and our military officials, following the authority of our government, only take life when necessary and no other time. And I hope and pray that you and I can encourage and care for those who have taken a life rightly. I hope we can lift them up and bless them and help them to find the peace that comes from Christ in all things.